kind of complete reprobate or something. You'll be fine.
Hey, I agree with you. I've been very civil, but I get kicked out of here like 2 to 3 times a week. And I'm not, I act like this. I'm pretty civil. I'm not like insulting anybody, but it's very
You sound like you
touchy,
might, from time to
very,
time,
very
occasionally.
touchy crowd.
Sounds like occasionally, from time to time, you might white knight for somebody once in a while.
I don't even know what that means.
You see somebody you feel there's some kind of injustice happening with them, so you decide to step in and be their hero.
Oh, yeah, I don't really do that.
That would be the only reason I could see you getting muted randomly or booted. It's that type of thing is looked down upon.
White knighting. No, I don't really do that. I just, I talk about stuff. I ask people questions. The questions make people angry. And then,
No, saying that makes people angry. I told you this the other night. You saying that makes me angry, not asking questions.
okay.
You're such a fucking little spaz, man.
Well, I'm sorry that you're angry.
Why don't you just fuck off?
I'm sorry that you're upset.
I don't give a shit if you're sorry or not. Fuck off.
You're obviously very angry.
You're a fucking passive-aggressive, pretentious little fucking shit, and I don't like you. I think you're disingenuous little prick.
I know you don't like me, T-Dubs. I know.
I mean, Chardsy, why do you keep coming back into the room, dude? I don't get it.
Oh, it's because it's very funny. And occasionally, I'll tell you the real reason. Occasionally, every once in a while, I do get a real conversation that's worth having. And that 1 in a 10 conversation is worth it to me. Even if 9 times out of 10 it's not going to happen.
Do you recall the last one that you had that was worthwhile?
Yeah, I think it was maybe a week or 2 ago.
What'd you get out of it?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think I learned a little bit more about why people believe in Flat Earth. Not just why they believe in it, but why they don't believe in the globe Earth.
I don't believe in the flat Earth at all. I look at an observation of the horizon, and I know that the horizon remains horizontal. This is an observation, not a belief. Now, a belief would be if I were to go beyond my current knowledge or anything that I could tangibly see or touch, and then start making claims based off of that. Like in regards to high altitude things or some kind of ice wall bullshit, that would become beliefs. But until then, I don't have a belief.
Okay, yeah, see, this man believes. He doesn't. He doesn't believe. He knows, and I respect that.
More like this, I identify as being a non-believer.
Right, because you don't have to believe. You know, right?
I want to know. I have the desire to know, and I just don't really have a desire for belief. That's all.
I can appreciate that.
I mean, Chardsy, do you at least acknowledge that there is a distinction between knowing and belief? Some people don't. They conflate the two. They say one's stacked on the other or something, or one encompasses the other.
Yeah, I think you can know something, and there are different levels of belief. You can believe in things in different ways.
Can you define
so
belief?
they are
Belief. I don't know. You, like I said, you believe in things at different levels in different ways. You believe what's on the other side of the horizon matches the maps in a different way that you believe there is some sort of omnipotent entity that has total power over the universe. You don't believe in religion in the same way that you believe in whatever this is. It's not the same level.
It's more like a loss of a belief, flat Earth. You know that?
Yeah, I can totally get that.
Because, if you have your base axioms, you know what your base axioms are, right?
I don't know what your base axioms are.
Well, I mean, like anyone's base axioms are generally whatever they directly experience firsthand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're sitting in a chair, you know you're sitting in a chair. You don't have to like believe you're sitting in a chair. Your direct experience, what all your senses could tell you would be in those base axioms. What if you were born on this earth without any kind of knowledge of anything else, never told about the globe or whatever, what would you say is self-evident? Can you name one thing about being on an oblate rotating spheroid that is self-evident? Chardsy?
I'm sure I could. Yeah. Do you actually want to hear it, or is this like a
Sure.
rhetorical
No,
device?
I'm not even. I think you're cool. I've heard you talk on here. You're a funny guy.
Oh,
And
thank you.
You're also patient and seem like a good person to talk to.
Yeah.
I'm the one that invited you.
Oh, you've got to be fucking kidding me.
Oh, T-dubs, come on.
Oh, you seriously? You're fucking fooled by this fucking shithead?
He's trying to have a nice conversation.
He does. He does. Let me just set it up. I was
He left.
seriously. He's like, oh my god, who's doing that? My number one enemy, Chardsy. You can't be nice to him at all. Well, I actually asked you if there's any. I'm trying to grill you and be nice to you.
No,
and T-Dubs didn't understand that. But what would you say would fall into your base axioms, self-evident, experience, firsthand experience that about and I'm not talking about interpretations of the sky or anything you've been told or learned about with like the way the sun sets or any of that. Like all those assumptions have to go out the window. What would you say if you were never told anything about that? Would be self-evident about the oblate spinning spheroid?
Right. You said interpretations of the sky. I'm going to touch on that. You're welcome to tell me if I'm off base here. But throughout the year, at different times of the year, you can look up at the sky during the night. You can see different constellations, different stars. And throughout the year, the stars that are visible, the constellations that are visible, they change. You can't see the same constellations in the summer that you can see in the winter. I think that's a compelling argument that things shift, that it's not all static.
But that's not exclusive to the globe, because if it's just the sky turning above us, then things are shifting anyway.
Well, no, and I can appreciate that, but the way that they shift, the observations that you make, I don't think you'd be able to explain that on a flat Earth in the same way that you might be able to explain it in a oblate spheroid, as you've described it.
Have you looked into that idea though? That there are explanations on the flat Earth side for that?
Well, like I said, I only have my own observations to draw on. I haven't seen a convincing way of how it's explained in Flat Earth. I don't know how you would conceptually explain it on a Flat Earth model.
I'll send you a video. I'll send you a live stream my buddy did earlier tonight. And he goes into the whole history of it and how, they were using rum lines for, forever, and they still do in a weird way, before they even thought of it as a spheroid, even though they supposedly knew it was a spheroid beforehand, according to the lore or gospel that was created to make us all think it was like ancient history, that people knew we were on a globe. And that doesn't seem to be the case. It was, even today they use, NASA, in fact, admits that they're using the stereocycles. It's just ancient cosmology that was flat Earth cosmology. They're still using the exact same formula of cycles. It was explained on the flat Earth for thousands of years before the globe idea even came around, and they still use those same flat Earth measurements for the navigation and everything. Baseline.
Yes.
Trig.
The celestial movements have been plotted on the celestial plane at vernal equinox as the starting point for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. They are angle measurements from the celestial plane. So the movement of the stars is another flat Earth proof.
Right.
So
I can appreciate
let's say that works both ways, Chardsy. I just wanted to know what would be self-evident, because that's one interpretation. Right. Now, let's say there is an interpretation for a flat Earth. If you were born here and never told about the globe, would you jump to, I must be rotating even though I don't feel it, even though my direct experience is a stationary level Earth? I'm going to assume I must be moving because the sky's moving. Is that really a fair assumption that you would figure that out on your own or think that on your own?
Well, I think so, given my own experience. I don't know if you want me to talk about it or if you'd like to monologue a little bit more.
Nice. So that's why I like you. I like your little jabs.
Yeah,
Your
little back and forth, right?
Like, there's no way to there's no way to combat that because there's no aggression in your voice whatsoever. It's awesome. But yeah, go ahead. I won't monologue anymore about monologuing.
No, and I appreciate you guys. No, I think there is some evidence that the Earth is not flat. If you're in the northern hemisphere, you could see Polaris. If you're in the southern hemisphere, you could see the Southern Cross, and you can't see either of those from either of the opposite hemispheres. And likewise,
you know that there's a flat Earth explanation for that too, right? So
no, I'm sure there is. I don't see how the explanation is consistent with the wider body of thought. Because
you saw two rotations of stars. Is that what you're talking about? The two rotations?
Well, not just rotations of stars, but also the seasons, right? Like if I'm in Los Angeles and it's summer and I fly down to Sydney, it's going to be winter. I don't understand how that works under the flat Earth body of thought.
Well, have you looked into it? Because there's explanations for the seasons and all of that.
Yeah, I haven't found anything particularly convincing.
You may not have looked deep enough, because there's lots of it. I mean, there's tons of it.
There absolutely
I mean, again, it's the same thing with the stars. There was the seasons and everything were worked out beforehand, when thousands of years before the last couple hundred, when people started thinking it was a globe.
I don't see how that would work.
Of the sky,
like cosmologically, I don't see how that would work out.
I'll send you. I don't think you've looked at some of the videos that I'll be sending you. If you check your DMs.
Your mic's sounding a little bit tinny. We can hear what you're saying, but it's just a bit difficult to make it out.
Who, me?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a bit fuzzy.
Let me change that. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, man.
Just a point of order. The Southern Cross can be seen from some parts of the Northern Hemisphere. So that was an incorrect statement.
At certain parts of the year.
I think Chardsy needs to go back and do a little bit more research before he just starts asserting just stupid shit.
Hey, can you see the Southern Cross from Los Angeles at any part of the year? That was my example.
You can see it north of the equator.
Right, because the equator tilts. So in the same way, you can see Polaris from the southern hemisphere at certain times of the year, depending on the tilt of the Earth. But that doesn't mean it's a general rule. As a general rule, if you're up in Junto, Alaska, you can't see the Southern Cross, and if you're down in Sydney, you can't see the Polaris. And that is a rule.
Yeah, but the thing is that there's
regardless of how powerful of a telescope you have or what kind of optics you're using, you just can't see it because the geometry of the planet blocks you from seeing it.
Yeah, but there's the equivalent explanations for the flat Earth with that. You realize that, Chardsy, right?
Equivalent? I don't think it's equivalent. I think they might be contradictory to it, but I don't think they're equivalent.
Well, let me get back to the point I was trying to make to you. You wouldn't say, if you were just born here and you lived here and grew to be a man, you never heard anything about the ball Earth. Your base axioms by that point would be my direct experience is a stationary level Earth, right? It's just like sitting in a chair at that point. You're not. It's not a belief because it's your base axiom, right?
I don't agree with that.
I know, but I'm saying you have to do the hypothetical. You were never told about
you're presenting a hypothetical. I don't agree that that's the base hypothetical. I think there's alternatives.
I haven't finished. You may interpret the sky eventually that you would convince yourself that you might be moving rather than the sky moving, right? But the reason it was thousands of years where people were not assuming that they were on a ball is because the direct experience of being on an old age spheroid would require a lot of leaps of faith that your base axioms don't require. Do you understand that? Like people upside down, rotating, not feeling it, not seeing curvature, but assuming it's there. I mean, you realize how it could have been concocted very, very extravagantly to make you think you're on a ball, right?
I can appreciate that. I don't really agree with that.
I'm not saying you should, but hypothetically, you see how it could have been done.
Hypothetically, anything is possible.
Otherwise, why would you be here?
I mean, hypothetically, we could assume anything, right?
Well, there is one way you can.
Realistically, I think historically, if you look back, people have known that the Earth has been round for thousands of years, and they've made assumptions.
Point of order. No. Point of order. Another incorrect statement. Sorry. If you're going to keep just rooting shit, I'm going to pull you up on the point of order every single time.
Okay.
Hey, Chardsy, actually, let me get you to talk about something else. I won't get you in trouble.
Sure.
Okay. I just want to. You talked about flights before, and I've heard you talk about how there's a weird path that it took when you went from California to Japan. Is that right? And what was that? You said there was some kind of weird, like it didn't make sense with the path you should have taken, but it was like going all over the place. What was that about?
Well, my assumption is, right, if the Earth is flat and you're traveling from two distant places to another that are on the same latitude, so the same distance from the North Pole, the flight path would roughly, look like an arc, right? Like a slight curve as you're traveling in the same direction around the North Pole. But in this particular, and this was a while ago, so I don't even know how you remember this, but in my particular example, it was sinusoidal. It was multiple curves, inflections on inflections that did not map up with how you might expect an aircraft to travel on a flat surface.
Okay, so you're saying it did fit the globe expectations, the sinusoidal pattern?
Yeah, I think what I saw from it,
So you followed it as if like you were looking at a globe and you said, oh, that makes sense because why would you be going in the sinusoidal pattern? That's what I'm wondering. Why not just straight across?
No. It's not me trying to match it up to a globe. It's just me interpreting. It's me observing the flight path. And I don't see why you would take that particular flight path on a flat plane.
Oh, okay.
Because it doesn't make any sense.
It didn't make any sense. I thought you were saying it didn't make any sense even on a globe.
No.
Okay. Well, let me talk to you about airplanes and what you might know about like just general aerodynamics.
Sure.
When you jump up, like you've heard of the conservation of momentum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you jumped up in the air and then you land back down where you were because they say you were on the earth, like say you're at like a latitude where they say the ground speed would be 500 miles per hour, right?
Something like that.
Yeah, so it tapers up to the equator. It's 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, about, and then it tapers down to zero at the pole, the way the globe model says.
I think you might be conflating some different things here, but I understand in general what you're saying.
Well, you know what the rotation is at the equator that they say is in miles per hour? It's 1,037 or whatever.
I have no idea. I'll take your word for it.
Well, that's the way I mean, I'll put a graph in somebody could help maybe put that in the chat, but it's basic globe model requirements that you believe that your if you're at the equator, you're spinning at 1,037 miles an hour. And then if you're anywhere in between, like say it's halfway in between, about 500 miles per hour is where you'd be jumping up from, right? And the globe model says the reason that you come back down to the same spot is because you were on the Earth rotating at 500 miles an hour already. So when you jump up, you're going eastward 500 miles an hour, even though it doesn't feel like you're going eastward because you were on the Earth moving at that speed constantly enough in the globe model that you wouldn't even notice that you're going eastward at 500 miles an hour, right?
Right. I think that's fair enough. If you're on the back of a pickup truck, the pickup's going 25 miles an hour, and you jump up on the bed of the pickup truck, you're gonna land back down on the bed because that's your relative velocity.
And it's the conservation of momentum that you landed back down on the same trampoline, whatever that video is you're talking about, where they're jumping on.
It's not a video; it's just a hypothetical.
Oh, have you ever seen the one? There's like these guys in the back of a pickup truck, and there's a trampoline, and they're jumping, and the pickup truck's just going in one linear direction at a constant motion, right? So they're trying to show you the principle of conservation of momentum with that, which is a thing. It's not like a pseudoscience to say there's conservation of momentum in that kind of situation, and they apply it to the Earth, right? They apply the same idea to, even though you're going in a tangential direction, which could be argued about, just the linear speed compared to the any kind of angular speed would maybe cause some complications there to begin with. But let's just say that all works that way. And the reason that you land back where you were is because you were moving on the Earth at 500 miles an hour. So that's why that you can expect that the Earth wouldn't move separately below you because you were on the Earth just moving at 500 miles an hour previously to you jumping, right? You get that?
I get it. What's your alternative?
Well, no, I'm saying, okay, so if, let's say you're in a helicopter and they say the helicopter goes up and hovers, they also apply that, where the helicopter was on the ground moving at 500 miles an hour. Therefore, you can just assume that it can go up and then come back down and land where it was because it was already moving from being on the ground at 500 miles an hour. So let's say that helicopter is now a plane, right? And the same thing for a plane. They assume that the plane's moving with the Earth, whatever speed it takes off from the ground from. So they apply this 500 miles per hour eastward tangential velocity to a plane as soon as it takes off, right?
Right, but it's not just the ground, it's also the atmosphere, because the atmosphere moves at the same speed of the ground, relatively speaking.
That's the theory, right? And that's usually the answer that people give with this situation that I'm drawing out. But it makes it a little more difficult if I draw it out this way. Now, the plane is going to take off going west-southwest, right, against the spin, but also towards the equator. So it's and it has no ground path, right? It's not even trying to follow a ground path. It's just a joyriding pilot, right? He's got to find a clearing somewhere around the equator. And he's been doing big loops and traveling all over the place, like going back to where he came from almost, thinking he forgot something, and then he found it and then went back. So he's going over many different tangential velocities, right? And the atmosphere keeping him in sync with the Earth is the issue, because the atmosphere isn't even said to be going at the same speed in lockstep, right? But the pilot can always treat the Earth as stationary and level. No matter where he flies, without a ground path, he's going against the spin, he's going to find a clearing, he's going to loop around, and he's going to land, whenever he feels like it. And he'll always be able to treat the Earth as stationary. Now, you got to believe that eastward tangential velocity of the plane, directly eastward, is now being carried by the atmosphere, because it wasn't the ground, right? The conserved momentum arguably would have been gone, pretty much soon after he took off because of the friction of the air. Anything that acts on the plane is not going to keep rotating automatically an extra 500 miles an hour, eastward, right? But even if you kept that conserved momentum and had 500, by the time you got to the equator, the atmosphere would have had to accelerate the plane backwards and sideways to 1,000 miles an hour so that the pilot could be in perfect sync with the Earth when he's trying to land on it at the equator, right? So you've got to believe that the air is carrying the plane backwards if he's facing westward when he's landing at 1,000 miles an hour, even as he slows to a land facing the opposite direction. There's no force there. There's no dynamics to it.
I totally understand.
Kinematic concept.
I understand what you're saying. I have a personal anecdote for this, which is it's kind of specific to this situation. So I flew from Los Angeles International Airport to Sydney International Airport, which crosses over the equator.
Exactly.
And it covers roughly about, half a hemisphere, maybe a little less. So when I flew from Los Angeles to Sydney, my flight time was about 12 hours. When I flew from Sydney to Los Angeles along the exact same flight path, it took 14 hours. So it was 2 hours more.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you explain? Why is that? Why did that happen?
Well, the reason that happens is because there's different air currents at different speeds. You got jet streams, right? And those jet streams carry the plane a lot faster one direction rather than the other.
Right. And why did the jet streams occur?
Why do they?
Yes.
There's temperature, pressure. Everything's caused by the
perhaps.
Well, no. In your interpretation, you want to make a rotation, but I'm examining the globe planes right now.
I don't have any. I'm not trying to. I'm just saying. I'm just positing possible solutions.
Yeah, that's the theory is right. They conflate if it's not a globe, right? Let's say it is flat and it's all just temperature and pressure, and we have these jet streams because of that. Well, the globe's going to latch onto that as, that's caused by the rotation, right?
Well, I will say personally, if you're flying from east to west, if you're saying the Earth rotates from west to east, right? It would make sense that the flight would take less time than if you're going from, the opposite direction.
Well, then you're for that. Then you're telling us that it's because the ground moves separately from the plane underneath, saving the plane time on getting there. Is that what you're saying?
Well, something like that.
Yeah, but think about what you're saying. Now you're saying that the ground is moving at a different eastward tangential velocity than the plane is, right? But that can't happen because the plane
which is why I arrived 2 hours sooner on my westward flight than my eastward flight.
Well, yeah, but if you're saying that's the reason, right? Then all flights, first of all flight patterns would take advantage of the Earth moving separately from the plane eastward. Like if you were going from New York to Dallas, let's say, right? You wouldn't even start flying towards where Dallas is. You would start flying southward because Dallas is going to be coming up on you because the Earth is moving separately from the plane, right? So you would just.
So if I were to look up some flight paths from New York to Dallas, you think they wouldn't be southwardly inclined?
No, it would be directly west southwest to Dallas. It wouldn't be abnormally south because it's waiting for Dallas to rotate to where the plane is going to meet it at. Everything would be different in our flight patterns. But that's not even my point I'm trying to get at. We've gone off on a tangent. I haven't even finished my point. If you're saying at all, first of all, that the Earth is moving eastward, so then therefore the plane could take advantage of that and fly to where it's going to be, then you're saying that the Dallas would still be moving eastward at its own rate, right? Whatever rate that is, while the pilot's trying to land the plane and slow down to 0 miles an hour. So now you got to imagine that the air is carrying the plane 100% of the time backwards at that new tangential velocity because you can just think of the atmosphere.
Who said 100% of the time? Right, it would only be partial.
Well, what about when it's trying to land? The force is
constant, right? But if the force is only 5 miles an hour in the eastward direction, but you're trying to fly 500 miles per hour, that's only a 1% difference.
Listen, my scenario was a 500 mile an hour tangential velocity to 1,000 miles an hour. That's twice as fast eastward, right? So if the plane, it doesn't even matter if it's not that much. If the plane's trying to land on the Earth, and the pilot can always assume to treat the Earth as stationary, because that's all he's ever trained for. He's not trained to deal with any kind of moving surface when he's landing on it. And if there was a moving surface, they would have to be. It would be like
air
currents. They have special trainers. Well, they have special training for the pilots that have to land on aircraft carriers, right? Because the thing is that the ground is moving, slightly drifting, right? And they'll often just even forego it and come back and circle around because the timing has to be perfect.
Or the
regular pilots
atmosphere
aren't
is moving around the aircraft, and they have to account for.
But the wind's going all directions, bro. You can't say there's one eastward wind pushing the plane backwards at the exact rate that the Earth is moving. When you have
right, but the Earth is moving at a constant rate, so you don't have to account for it because it's moving at a constant rate.
Yeah, but it's not even said to be
relatively speaking, it's moving. It's not moving at all.
Well, that's the thing. It's either not moving at all, or it's moving and you can't tell that it's moving at all. And that wouldn't be possible if there was two different reference frames.
And those two things are the same.
No, they're not. Not even claimed it. The globe model doesn't even claim for them to be the same. They try to latch on to the idea that the atmosphere isn't moving at the same rate as the ground, and that's what causes the different weather patterns, right? Because it's not in sync. And fluid dynamics wouldn't even work that way anyway. Right? Fluid dynamics wouldn't allow that.
Do you not agree that as you go further up in the atmosphere, the wind speed, the rate of change is higher the further you go up?
With jet streams, sometimes that's true, but that's not always true. It could be going the opposite direction. There's jet streams that go both ways. But that's the thing, is there isn't the idea that the Earth is moving.
That's not relative velocity.
Well, what about if you did get in a jet stream, right? Now that's supposed to be saying that the globe says that's moving, 2 up to 500 miles an hour faster than the rotation, right? So if you're in that jet stream, they say you're supposedly going faster than the actual rotation of the Earth. Now, if the pilot jumps out of that jet stream, right, he's going faster than the rotation. How's he going to get in sync so he can treat the Earth as stationary when he lands?
And maybe he just slows down a little bit.
Yeah, but they're not trained to time their plane to the rotation speed of the Earth. And that's the problem. There's so many variables involved. If there was ever a chance the ground would be moving at any kind of rate separately eastward, the planes would be made differently. Because think about it, if he's flying west-southwest and facing westward as he lands, then there'd be all of this rotation happening separate from the plane, right? Because the plane only got the conservation of momentum from being on the ground. And the atmosphere is not said to be in lockstep with the Earth anyway. So that even if the atmosphere were moving it backwards and there's winds moving it the opposite direction miscellaneously at a variable rate, different hour, different day, there would be all those things that it would have to overcome for it to be in perfect sync. So the pilot, who's only taught to treat the Earth as stationary, can just land as if there's never going to be a problem with the rotation speed eastward, mismatched from his plane's eastward speed. But that's not it's either stationary or there's some kind of magical atmosphere going on that you can't. Out
of curiosity, what would the difference be, do you think?
500 miles an hour. That's what I said. He started at the latitude of 500. 500 miles, and he goes to the equator where it's said to be 1,000. So now he's got to be going faster, double, twice as fast backwards and sideways, because the atmosphere would be carrying the plane backwards, even though there could be heavier westward winds one day, lighter westward winds.
It's not a gradient at all. It's 500. If you take off from like Papua New Guinea, you go to New York City, it's going to be 500 miles an hour difference until you hit the ground, and then it's just like a big jerk.
Well, it would be that. You'd break your wheels off if it was at an angle.
No, I think it's a gradient, man. I think it changes as you go up further in latitude.
Well, it changes totally up to zero at the poles. That's the whole point.
Right.
You didn't know that.
So it sort of adjusts in the same way,
But it doesn't. It doesn't adjust. The pilot does nothing to adjust for the tangential velocity of the Earth.
No, not the pilot adjusting, but the natural system adjusts. It's not the same system. Is the same system at 0 degrees latitude the same system at 30 degrees latitude or 60 degrees latitude? It's not. It adjusts. It's a gradient. It's not the same.
Right. Well, that's the thing, is now you have a kinematic concept, right? that no matter where the plane goes, it doesn't matter if they're saying the ground is twice as fast, because it's in the system that I think of as a whole. It could just be in perfect sync and not have to worry about being out of sync, right? But that's not even what the globe model tries to claim. They try to claim that there'd be a Coriolis effect to begin with, but they don't have to worry about it because it'd be so much less than the winds, right? I mean, there's a tangential gradient that would have to be accounted for, and it would have to be perfect, and you would have to have a dynamic force. You think that the air is accelerating the plane backwards twice as fast, and the pilot has no idea?
I think that's called friction.
Well, it doesn't matter what you call it. That would be a headwind that he would be aware of, and there's no headwind. You know that they say that the only time that the atmosphere is truly in sync with the Earth is when there's no wind, right? That'd be the not wind. There'd be no wind because that's when it's in sync. So you're saying the no wind part is keeping it in sync, even though it's not even claimed to be, because that weather patterns are supposedly caused from it being out of sync to begin with, and winds are not predictable. You'd have winds westward blowing it off of this supposed wind that you imagine is accelerating it backwards. You can't separate the wind from the atmosphere. The wind pushing the plane is the air pushing the plane. You can't have air pushing the plane backwards without an actual dynamic force. Kinematically, you can just say, oh, well, we'll just add that on mathematically as if it exists, even though we have no dynamic explanation for it. That's the difference between kinematics and dynamics. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I do. And I think you make a very good point. So my question now is, right, now that I've been convinced, I think, how is there such a global, I call it a conspiracy. How can so many people be deceived by this when it's so obvious? You know, there must be such a significant power behind this that so many people have been deceived.
Well, that's why people have been talking about it for 24/7 straight since 2015. Literally,
Right.
people have been talking about it every second of the day.
I totally get that. Yeah, but why isn't it bigger? You know, like
because people would rather not know.
Why would they rather not know?
Well, you were talking. I heard people on here talking to you about this before, and it was a good explanation. They were saying that there's these grounding principles that we're taught when we're young that become like a foundation for our psyche, right? And even though it goes against everything we think of as common sense and direct experience, where our psyche's been grounded in this idea that we're on this ball through all the propaganda, seeing it on the movies, seeing it, hearing references to it, also hearing negative references to anyone that thinks it's flat, to think that's the stupidest thing when it's actually the smartest thing. They did everything reversed, right? They made you think you're smart to know you're on a globe and anything about those kind of, kinematic concepts that they've put in your head, right? That's what makes you smart. But they're laughing at you and laughing at us trying to argue with you because they're like, it's obvious, but they can't get it because they're so indoctrinated.
Right, so let's stop arguing then.
Oh, I'm not arguing. I just wanted to make that clear to you. You get it now, right? Planes couldn't even land. If it's a globe, planes can't land, right? You get what my point was, or are you just saying that?
Oh, I do get what your point is. Yeah, I feel like there's a big disconnect, and that's what I'm trying to bridge. I'm not trying to be gosh, I don't even know the word, abstentious.
Well, don't worry about what you're trying to do. What you just did was understand that planes couldn't even land if it was a spinning ball, and there's a tangential gradient that they would have to account for that they're not in sync with the Earth with. Right. And that for me, that's the reason I bring it up, because that for me debunks the globe better than anything else, because it's a direct experience we all have. We've all been on planes. You went from Los Angeles to Australia, Sydney, and there would, you realize that you would have had this, for you to be in sync, right? Otherwise, if you had cameras on the bottom of the plane, right, you'd be able to see that the Earth is moving eastward at a different rate than your plane is as you went over the equator and then down to Sydney.
And I think the plane did have cameras, actually. We were able to see like the outside of it from the little screens on the headrests.
All right. I've never heard of that before. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was pretty
cool.
That's
perfect. If they do that, then you would have seen, like, as your plane's going southward, you would have seen the Earth rotating left to right underneath your plane. You get that? You would have seen a movement in the opposite direction or in a perpendicular direction to the angle of the plane. And you could prove the Earth spins if it was spinning by just that very fact alone. You just fly from Los Angeles to Sydney, Australia, and you would have had to speed up to 1,000 miles an hour to be in sync at the equator. And then as you went over the equator, then your plane would have been slowed down in the opposite direction, right? From what?
That's literally what happened. That's what I'm saying.
Well, it would if you were on a globe. It would have to happen.
That's literally what I'm saying. Is it took 2 hours longer to go the way back than it did to go there in the first place. It's an extra 2 hours.
Right, but that's because of the jet streams, not because of the rotation of the Earth. And if it was the rotation of the Earth, you could have had those cameras capture the rotation of the Earth moving eastward at a different rate than your plane is. It wouldn't have looked like a stationary Earth below, but it looked like a stationary Earth below the whole time, other than the direction of your plane going over the stationary Earth. Otherwise, there would have had to be a force that you could explain dynamically, right, with the air pushing the plane backwards and sideways as it goes south-southwest, right, to speed up to 1,000 miles an hour as it crosses the equator, and then somehow push it the opposite direction to slow it down so it could treat the Earth as stationary when it lands in Sydney. And as it slows to zero, you have to imagine the plane is now going backwards at a different rate than it would have been going backwards when it took off. There's no dynamics to it. There's no dynamics you can name or even research. Go look into it. Come back and tell me what you find out about the tangential gradient and how the plane stays in sync with the Earth. You'll be on a wild goose chase with all the different answers Google tries to give you.
Well, isn't the whole point of airplanes that they don't stay in sync with the Earth, that they like outpace it?
If that were the case, you could prove your ball Earth, is what I was just saying. If they were outpacing the Earth, right? If you were starting from somewhere near the North Pole, where you had close to zero tangential velocity eastward, you were flying to a city on the equator that's moving at 1,000 miles an hour, you would have to chase the target to even get there to begin with.
Well, how can I travel from two places that are on opposite sides of the Earth, and when I leave from one place and I land in the opposite place on the other side of the planet, if I leave in the morning, I still get there in the morning? You know, like if I leave at nighttime.
If it was a flat Earth, right, and the pilot just flew there and landed like it was a flat stationary Earth, there'd be no problems. If the Earth were moving eastward at a separate rate than the plane, there would be problems with him landing because he'd have to have the plane going backwards at the same exact rate so he could treat the Earth as stationary. Regardless of how you picture it in your head, it has to happen on a stationary Earth. Otherwise, the pilots would have to be trained to deal with a moving runway. Necessarily, it's the antecedent to a rotating Earth and a plane in a separate reference frame. There's an inertial and a non-inertial reference frame you have to deal with. And they're not even said to be in sync by the globe model itself because the atmosphere is not in lockstep. No globe Earther tries to claim a lockstep atmosphere any longer because fluid dynamics wouldn't even work that way. Plus, they try to say the weather patterns themselves are caused by the atmosphere not being in sync. And we know winds go in all directions, so the dynamics would never even work anyway, because the winds could be going heavier westward one day or lighter westward. And how is it going to compensate for those westward winds more one day and more, like it could think its way through it to make the plane in sync? So the pilot could be under the illusion that the Earth is stationary when he lands, even though as he's slowing down to zero in the opposite direction, you have to believe the atmosphere is blowing the plane backwards at the exact rate of the Earth. Dude, that's crazy. So any pilot, that if you try to convince a pilot that was happening, even if he thought he was on a globe Earth, he would be laughing at you because he would know if his plane's being carried backwards twice as fast as where he took off from.
He wouldn't. That's complete crap.
Oh, he wouldn't. He would just be under the illusion that it's stationary, huh?
So what is it? When a pilot's flying, what does he sense? Wind speed. That's all. How fast the air is coming over the aircraft. That's the only thing he's really aware of.
Right?
Until he starts to corner. If he's flying in a straight line, he knows nothing other than the airspeed. When he starts to corner, he'll feel G forces. So if he's traveling through the air at a given airspeed, his speed relative to the ground is irrelevant to him.
Well, yeah, it has to be irrelevant because it's stationary. If it was actually moving, it wouldn't be irrelevant. It'd be a big problem.
Whether it's moving or stationary, it's irrelevant to him because his speed relative to the air, which is relative to the ground, is more or less controlled by his maximum airspeed and the maximum wind speed. He can never be travelling faster than the ground in the combination of wind speed and airspeed.
Right, because it's stationary ground. If the ground were moving at a separate rate eastward than the plane, what does matter, it would matter if it was actually moving. Well, yes, because if I ask you this question, which will tell everyone everything that they need to know, what would be the difference between training a pilot to fly and land on a stationary Earth as opposed to training a pilot to fly and land on an oblate spinning spheroid Earth? What would be the difference in how you would train them?
There's no difference.
Exactly the answer I expected. Everyone hear that? There would be no difference, even though we have a tangential gradient to deal with, without any dynamic forces to explain how the plane would be in sync with the Earth. He's going to say there would be no difference because the pilot would be well aware of those things, which is my point you came in on, and just declared that it's wrong without any kind of explanation that actually fits the model that you believe in.
I'm just gonna intervene real quick here because I heard something insane. There's no explanation as to how the plane is in sync with the Earth. Is that what you said?
Yep, it wouldn't be in sync.
No, there is an explanation. It's conservation of momentum. It's the same concept as when you throw a ball in the air in a train or something, right? Like even if you don't give it, any like what's the word? Like you just throw it straight up. It's not going to go backwards in the opposite direction of the train. It's still going to travel with the train, right? So why is that? It's because of the conservation of momentum, which is the same concept that applies to planes. That's why they're consistent with their position on the Earth.
You weren't here for the beginning of my scenario that I was talking to Chardsy about. What I said was I asked if he was familiar with the conservation of momentum and the idea that if you jumped up at a latitude where they say the ground's moving at 500 miles an hour, right? The reason you wouldn't expect that the Earth is moving separately below you is because you were on the ground already moving at 500 miles an hour and you conserve the momentum so you land back down in the same spot. That's what you're talking about, right?
You would land, yes, yeah.
Yeah, right. So that's the conservation of momentum that the plane or the helicopter or the person jumping up would impart. It's imparted onto the plane or thought to be because it's already moving at that speed, at that latitude. The problem I was presenting is when it goes west-southwest against the spin, it's just a joyriding pilot. He's going to find a clearing. There's somewhere to land in after he does a bunch of loops all over the Earth. He's going all different directions all over the place. But eventually he's going to land around the equator where they say the ground is moving twice as fast as where he took off from, which is where he got the conservation of momentum from. So even if you kept that 500 eastward tangential velocity conservation of momentum from where he took off from, even if you kept, which is ridiculous to think, it would still be moving eastward at 500 miles an hour by the time it got to the equator. But even if you kept all of that, you wouldn't have the 1,000 mile an hour rotation speed that they say the Earth is going at the equator, right? So the plane would have to be, especially if it's going against the spin, facing westward when it lands. Now you have to imagine the atmosphere is carrying the plane backwards twice as fast as where it took off from, even though it's facing the opposite direction and slowing to 0 miles an hour to land on a surface that pilot can always assume to treat as stationary. So you have to understand that there's no dynamic explanation for that, and winds go in all directions, which would be variables that would not even be able to even be calculatable by any pilot that's actually having to deal with a tangential velocity gradient where he's leaving a surface that's moving at 500 miles an hour and having to be twice as fast eastward, headed in the opposite direction by the time he lands. There is no globe explanation for that other than to say you don't train pilots differently. It's just like it's stationary, even though it's rotating, and there would be two different reference frames with a tangential gradient that is not accounted for.
Give it a second. So, just real quick, I can give you the details on that, but I believe that the explanation for what you just said on the globe has to do with the fact that the atmosphere moves with the Earth as well. I cannot give you exactly the specifics on that because I'm not. Yeah, sure.
I just said you'd have to imagine the atmosphere making the plane go faster backwards and sideways as it's coming to a land facing westward. But there's no dynamics. The pilot would know that his plane's moving backwards and sideways twice as fast by the time he gets there, because there would be winds in the form of the atmosphere pushing him backwards that he would have to deal with. But as he lands, he could have westward winds pushing him. He could have northward, he could have southward winds pushing him the opposite direction. So you have to imagine the actual winds, the dynamic winds, pushing him perpendicular.
It's not
that
the
are imagined
wind.
to keep him in sync with the
wind pushing him.
As he's facing westward.
That's not how it works.
Okay, so the atmosphere pushes him without it being a wind? No, they say that the only time.
There wouldn't be wind pushing him backwards. You're completely misunderstanding.
You're right. There wouldn't be. There wouldn't be, and there isn't, because it's stationary. You have to imagine that
what's the explanation? You're misrepresenting the explanation. That's not what it means.
Well, no, they say that the only time. No, listen. They say the only time that the atmosphere is actually supposedly in sync with the Earth is when there's no wind, right? So you have to imagine, just because it's the air that's thought to be moving faster at that place where he's trying to land, just the mere idea that he's in the air, that means he's already automatically accelerating backwards at that rate. There doesn't even need to be a wind. It's just because we think of the air as in sync, we can think of the plane as in sync, even though there's no dynamics that would make that at all possible in any kind of world that any kind of laws of physics apply to.
What's the rate of acceleration that the pilot would have to experience? So let's simplify this new perspective. Oh, we just lost him, did we? I know.
Oh, okay.
Let's simplify this. Let's go back to the scenario where the air is still. Just to control things, right? So we can talk about one thing at a time. So let's assume that the air is still. The pilot's taken off at 45 degrees north and he's flying to the equator on a route directly north-south. So what is the rate of change of momentum the pilot has to have in terms of absolute momentum from an external observer to keep up with the globe? How quickly does his momentum need to change over the 5 hours it takes to do that trip?
Well, for my scenario, it makes it a little more difficult for you to figure that out, because
start off with a simple scenario. You've got to start with a scenario you can understand. You can add everything you want in so nobody can ever solve your problem. If you want to understand it, you need to simplify it first, then add the complexity. But you add the complexity and then you add more until nobody can even understand the situation you're describing. So start with a simple scenario.
Let me make it very clear for you.
And nail it down and stick to it.
No. I'm not going to be directed by you, first of all, because I was talking to Chardsy about a very particular scenario that you butted in on as if you had an answer for it, and you don't, because I've talked to you enough times about this, where you say you imagine the plane going from the North Pole to the equator and somehow picking up a tangential velocity of 1,000 miles an hour without the pilot doing anything, or even knowing that his plane is being moved sideways and all of that, and you try to say it's a ground path, because if he's staying on course, then he must be correcting for that, and somehow the plane is making himself go eastward faster. That is not the case.
Exactly.
In this scenario, that's why I make this scenario where he's going west-southwest. He has no ground path. He's doing big loops. He even went back almost to where he started from. And you have to imagine that whole time that he's staying in sync with the Earth, that changes its eastward tangential velocity up to 1,000, down to 500, and then he goes back to where he came from. Now he's going left. Now he's going to the right-hand side of the plane just as fast as the Earth, and then he straight back around, and now his left-hand side of the plane is going faster because of the air thought to be in sync. All of those dynamic things that are making the plane go back and forth to be in perfect sync with the Earth are just happening because of the idea that he's in the air. This is just a pilot that's joyriding. He's going to find a clearing to land in. He's got no path. He's got no destination, no calculations you could even make. But we all know he can treat the Earth as perfectly stationary, because that's how pilots have done since they started flying. They didn't have to have a ground path. They just treat the Earth as stationary, and the only way that's possible is if it's actually stationary.
Oh, first of all, I agree. They treat it as stationary because the rate of rotation compared to their speed is very slow. So if you consider that pilot doing his joyride, at what point in time does his speed relative to the ground exceed his maximum allowable airspeed plus the maximum wind speed?
Well, what do you mean, speed forward? No, the plane only flies forward in one
any
vector.
time. When does his speed over the ground exceed his maximum allowable airspeed plus the wind speed?
No, you understand that there's two different vectors we're talking about, Daza. The eastward tangential vector is separate. Like, listen, no, his forward vector, right, west-southwest, facing against the spin, and going side to side, that's a completely separate vector from the eastward tangential vector that he would have to be in sync with the Earth with. He does nothing at all with the plane to try to make it go sideways and backwards to be in sync with the Earth. There's nothing about that the pilot flying forward has to do with this eastward tangential gradient. That has to happen separately in the background without the pilot. Otherwise, we would train a pilot to deal with that, which you already admitted they don't train for. They just train them as if it's stationary.
Yeah, because so you look at the scenario when an aircraft takes off. They start off, they have the same velocity as the ground, right? Whatever the ground is doing, they have the same velocity.
Supposedly,
do you agree on that?
That's imaginary as well. That's imaginary.
No. If you're on the ground, if the ground is moving, you have the same velocity, right? Whether it's moving or not, you have the same.
That's the theory. That's the theory, right? So if you're headed west-southwest from the airport you take off from at a 500 mile per hour latitude, then you just have to imagine the plane's going sideways and backwards at 500 miles an hour because it started from there, even though it's only going forward at 100 miles an hour the whole time. You have to imagine this. Let's say it's a Cessna. It's only going 100 miles an hour max, but it goes west-southwest against the spin. Somehow you have to imagine it going from 500 miles per hour eastward, sideways, and backwards to 1,000 miles an hour eastwards and backwards as it's coming down to a land still carried by this air thought to be about in sync, not even in sync, just generally in sync or thought to be in sync. So somehow it's in perfect sync now. So now it's just perfectly in sync. The plane doesn't have to worry about any other winds that affected that flight route because those winds aren't part of the atmosphere that's moving his plane backwards and sideways faster than when he took off from. Just those winds have nothing to do with it, right? He could be pushed, in the opposite direction, heavy westward winds all day long, but he's still moving backwards at just the right amount so that he can treat the Earth as stationary.
At the beginning.
There's no dynamics to it, Daza. You can just imagine it and kinematically think of it as it works, but the dynamics would not work. There's none of it. None of it would work.
And so back to Matrix's question, I don't need to prove that my aircraft is the same speed as the ground because I'm attached to the ground.
I never claimed you had to prove the aircraft is the same speed as the ground. I asked you to prove the ground was spinning. The ground's moving. Yes, it does.
No.
Because if you can't prove the ground moving, all of your flight shit means fuck all.
Okay. So let's start off.
Well, if the ground was moving, all the flight shit would be fucked.
Hey, if you just went on for 5 minutes, give me a crack. So let's start off on the ground, right? We're on the ground. There's some wind. Our speed, if we've got some rotational motion with the Earth or not, our speed relative to the ground is 0. There is an airspeed, which is also relative to the ground. It is in some direction. It is at some small speed compared to how fast our aircraft can go. We take off. We have some speed relative to the air. We have some speed relative to the ground. And we fly. Now, the question here is what happens to our speed relative to the rest of the universe, right? If the Earth is rotating. So the plane is pushing along, pushing against the air. The air is wind, and our speed is compared to the wind, which is compared to the ground. We can never exceed the ground speed by more than those two put together, right? We do this for a few hours, whether the Earth is moving or not. We have never got behind the Earth by more than our allowable airspeed plus the wind speed. We slow down and we land. That is as simple as it is, right?
So what are you saying? The ground's not moving? We know. We're trying to fucking tell you that.
I'm saying it doesn't matter whether it's moving or not. there's no difference, right? Because you're not moving fast.
So excellent. If there's no difference and you can't even prove difference, how do you know it's moving?
You can't tell by ordinary aircraft flight. That's what I'm saying.
So if you're flying north, let's just pick a day. There is 0 wind. You're flying north. Why is the ball tub not rotating underneath you?
Are we following a track matrix? We've got a flight plan?
You are flying north.
Okay, so we've got a compass heading we're following.
North.
So it's important. I need to know how we're determining north. Are we just facing north and flying?
Oh, you can go and sniff your armpits for all I fucking care. You're going north.
Okay. So
for fuck's sake, why do you have to dribble around so much?
Because it makes a difference. If you drive a car...
No, it doesn't.
Right?
You're flying north. There is 0 wind. How do you account for the ball tub that's supposed to be rotating underneath you?
So if there's 0 wind and you're flying north, how far are we flying? And for how long? And how fast?
5,000 miles north.
5,000 miles north. So that's going to take us 6 or 8 hours, right? And
correct.
So if we were to just point and follow compass north, we would get some kind of drift, I'm sure of it.
You're sure of it?
Move.
Proven, or you're just imagining this?
Well, it's like anybody here. Nobody has any concrete proof of this data because pilots.
So you've got no proof of ground movement underneath the plane. Excellent. That's all I want to know. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and that's what I said before, that there is no. It doesn't give you any evidence one way or the other. But it's easy to account for it.
Except the only problem is not having to dip your nose to go around it. That's a bit of a problem. But anyways.
What's the rate of dip? 1 degree every 60 miles?
Yeah, but it's still negative. That's the problem. Planes don't fly negative pitch.
But
you know that as well as I do.
So what is your pitch measured relative to?
The gyroscope that's in the plane.
Yeah, but not just the gyroscope. It's the gyroscope is correcting for down, right? So it's always pointing down.
No, it's not.
No,
the gyroscope is fixed off takeoff. You know that.
The gyroscope.
Okay, Daza, you can make up all the stories you like, but if it's constantly correcting for down as you worded it, you may as well not have pitch data. Because that means it would never be accurate because it's always changing for down. Pitch data is based off of when the gyroscope first spools up. It gets locked into its position at its horizontal, and then the plane pitches yours and rolls around it. And that data is recorded.
There are no mechanical gyroscopes that can maintain perfect rigidity in space during those kind of maneuvers. Gyroscopes are constantly corrected by things called pendulous vanes, and in more modern...
That's to slow down the inaccuracies, we know.
Yeah. But the whole aim is to give you a reliable reference as a pilot that points directly to
as horizontal,
ground,
so they know where the horizon is.
Yeah, and then get a horizon from your vertical reference, right?
And the data is registered from this. So your problem is you probably haven't looked at pitch data. It also shows altitude. If you'd have looked at it, you'd have went, oh, wow, the pitch is consistent. So if the pitch is consistent and you're flying around a ball, that means you would have to gain in elevation. Now, you have a look at your elevation and your elevation doesn't gain. So you have to question that. Why does the elevation not gain? Why does the pitch not gain? Because there's no curvature underneath it. You're flying over a plane.
So
that's why. If you were flying over a curve, your pitch would be slightly down, or you'd fly straight, tilt down. Fly straight, tilt down if you wanted to make it really choppy. It would have to be negative to get around a ball, or your elevation would be dropping. Or raising to suit which way you're going.
Can I give you a hypothetical, which is the ball model? So in the ball model, vertical is radial, right?
We're not after your hypotheticals. We're after reality. This is where you guys get coming unstuck. It's just reality, mate.
Well,
this is what happens. If you don't like it, well, deal with it.
Well, everything else says that reality is actually curved. But anyway.
Except the measurement. Everything says it's curved. So let's go and measure it, Daza, you and me. Let's go and get a big fuck-off laser and we'll shoot the bastard across a lake and we'll see what comes out. You tell me when you're ready, I'll take you there, mate.
So you accept the laser, but you won't accept geodetic survey, right?
Why would I accept survey? Allegedly, think about this logically, Daza. If you do a measurement, why does it need to be modified through a formula after you've done the measurement? You've done a direct measurement. If you measure your table at a specific distance, so 1 metre wide, why then do you need to put it through a formula to bend it? Why? If you've measured it directly, that's a direct measurement. You don't have to punch those numbers through a formula to wrap it around a ball. Interesting how geodetic survey does that.
You have this problem, though. If you do not do that, your geodetic survey data does not line up.
Because it's not a fucking ball. That's why it doesn't line up. Hello, McFly.
If you do not apply these adjustments, the data does not line up. The adjustments are because you're on a ball, and to make things.
The adjustments are because you're not on a ball. It doesn't line up because you're a fucking clown. Seriously, Daza, if you've measured something, you've measured something. You don't have to bend it and wrap it and warp it. The measurements would be direct. They are accurate and true. Why do they have to run it through a formula to wrap it around a ball?
Because you need to be able to compare it or join it to other measurements that are also on that same surface. So basically, it's
you've got nothing. You know that. You've got nothing. You're in here dribbling shit. I'm going back to my computer.
I'll agree I'm not an expert on geodetic surveying. I can talk to you about GPS, but we won't do that today. We've done that before.
Yeah, and you failed last time, so don't bother again.
I don't think I failed. I don't think anybody... The only person that's ever given a reasonable refutation of GPS was T-Dub, and that was I have no evidence that I haven't seen it work everywhere kind of refutation, and that's all that he could do. But you cannot dispute the fact that GPS measures curvature. But anyway, back to the flying, right?
And you can't prove it does anyways. So here we are at a loggerheads. You can't prove it does measure curvature, and we can't prove it doesn't, but yet you claim that there's these things up in space, which is a violation of natural laws. So
it's not
where
a
are you going,
of natural
Daza?
laws.
So they're not in
like
space?
QE told you that. Oh, they're in space. There's no doubt about that. They have to be.
So how do they get to space when it's a violation of natural law?
It's not a violation of natural law. That's how.
Okay, then. Please explain to the panel why it's not a violation of natural law.
Okay, so we have an observable phenomena in the atmosphere where the pressure reduces with altitude. So, and this is directly measurable, right? You can measure the pressure with altitude, and by the time you get to 10 kilometres, commercial aircraft height, you're down to less than 1/10 of the surface pressure. If you were to create an amateur rocket and shoot it up to 30 kilometres or 50 kilometres, you'd be down to 1/100th of the atmospheric pressure.
Harriet.
If you had the resources to go to 100 kilometres, you would get so low you couldn't measure the pressure anymore. So your natural violation is that pressure, right?
So you're claiming the pressure gradient goes all the way up, all the way up, all the way up, till it just zeroes off and then runs negative numbers.
Yep. No, it doesn't go negative, no. It goes to zero.
Allegedly, space is a vacuum with 10 to the negative 17 torr.
That's a positive number.
Positive?
10 to the negative 17 torr is a positive number.
Well, have you ever stood next to a tractor tyre when it goes off and it ruptures or punctures?
Yeah, what's the pressure in a tractor tyre?
Only about 40 pounds, 50 pound.
40. Yeah, okay. So what's the pressure?
And what's the difference between ground? And here's another problem, Daza. You claim about this gradient, but in order for you to have gradient, you've got to have containment in the first place for your pressure. Your gradient needs containment for the pressure in the first place. See how you've got pressure gradient? You're concentrating on the gradient. You're forgetting about the pressure bit.
Yeah.
So again, how do you get into space? How do you get into space again with your containment required for your pressure?
So I'm making no claims about a container, where it is.
I have a relevant.
No, you're making claims about getting into space and how it's not a violation of natural law.
Matrix.
Yeah. So, yeah, I can see your container collapsing there. So,
no, that's just hollow words, Daza. I can see you dancing around with fuck all evidence.
Sorry,
because we can prove this.
If I could address the side chat real quick, Matrix. I'm trying to yes and what you were saying, bro. Because you made a mention.
A vacuum. Oh my goodness.
I got you.
Yeah. Okay. So what's the pressure difference between the inside of that container and the outside?
Not as much as what space is, allegedly, to what we are here.
Tell me what the pressure difference is.
Inside that thing?
Yeah. 14 psi is the pressure difference.
It's far less than the vacuum of space, that's for sure.
No, it's 14 psi. What's the difference between the vacuum of space?
Look at him. No. It's 14 psi. So let me get this straight. On the ground, we're supposed to be, I think it's about 760 torr, and now you're saying that's only 14 psi, so that's not a problem.
So it's
10 to the negative 17 versus that. Daz, you're full of shit.
So, Matrix, do you want to go to the absolute extreme here, right? So you've got 10 to the negative 17 torr.
Yeah, Daz, you're just dancing around it. You've got an extreme vacuum. Look at the shipping container there. Right. So under gas laws, what would happen? So all the gas would fuck off. You know that as well as I do.
So let's go to the most.
And he's still not going to accept that. He's just going to keep preaching.
Just let me finish. So let's go to the most extreme scenario you can imagine. Zero pressure, right? That is the most extreme vacuum, zero pressure, which is not 10 to the minus 17, it's zero, okay? So what is the difference between 0 psi and atmospheric pressure at sea level?
I'm going to read something out for you because obviously you're too fucking stupid to understand anything else. If your theory is found to be against the second law of thermodynamics, I give you no hope. There is nothing but for you to collapse in deepest humiliation. Arthur Eddington.
Wait, Matrix, real quick, before we continue, can you state the second law of thermodynamics?
High pressure or Matrix? No, that's not correct.
I didn't hear what that was, but anyways. You're breaking up, KC. I just heard, like, static.
All right.
Yeah. So anyway, right. Regardless of
what anything else you want anyone... Daza?
No.
Your claim is going to be, from perfect zero, you're only 14 psi difference at best. So therefore, it's only 14 psi.
That's correct. That is the answer. Well done.
You're a fucking idiot.
The 10 to the minus 17 torr is better than zero. That's more pressure than zero, right?
Where is zero? Where have you measured zero? Where is this at?
Well, there is no zero measurement. We don't need zero measurement, right?
Why are you talking about it? If there's no such a thing?
Yeah, that's it. Because we're trying to make it as bad as possible, right? We're trying to make the scenario as worse as we possibly can. And we know that...
are you trying to fake it till you make it?
No, we know that when we get into the measurable upper atmosphere where we've sent instrumentation, we know that by the time we get up 20 or 30 kilometres, the pressure is so close to zero, it doesn't matter. Right?
When and where?
Okay, so you want to know the specifics of when this was done?
Yeah, when and where and who?
Who, what, when, where, and how?
There's a whole bunch of amateur rockets that have done this, that have gone up to 20 or 30 kilometres.
You post You post it?
Not now, I can't. But you've seen this stuff before, Jimsy. You know it.
Really? You have? You got this?
Yep.
You got the zero measurement?
No, there's not a zero measurement. I'm trying to make it worse than our practical measurements, right?
There is no zero measurement. You made a claim about zero measurement, but you don't have it.
Yeah, I'm saying I want to make it as bad as possible, right? I want to say that when we get up there, it is actually zero.
So you don't.
But the reality is,
the lack of evidence is the evidence. That's your argument.
So the reality is, it doesn't matter how low the pressure goes; it's never more than 14 psi below sea level. That's the answer.
So the zero movement of the ground is the evidence of zero movement of the movement of the ground.
It has nothing to do with movement of the ground. I'm not going to know how we got here, but we got onto the atmospheric pressure.
Evidence of zero. So you got nothing for the globe. Zero.
We got to the point where we're talking about the atmospheric pressure. And somebody said there was a violation. And I said there's no violation because we can measure the pressure gradient in the atmosphere, and it clearly drops to effectively zero, right?
So you jump from the non-movement of the ground and clay movement, and you go to claiming zero pressure.
But I don't know how we got onto the pressure argument, but we did.
I have to go actually now, Daza, real quick. Did you see the thing I put in the chat? I'll post it in there one more time for you, just so you know the situation.
Perspective, we need to nail down the scenario, right? We need to start off with the basics. We need to eliminate variables, and we need to look at these things in detail.
Look at what I put in the chat. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just having a look at it now.
This is the flight that Chardsy was talking about, right? Where he goes from Los Angeles to Sydney.
Now, I've done that one.
For the plane to stay in sync, right, with the Earth. So otherwise, you could just put cameras on the bottom of the plane, and you could see that the Earth is moving eastward at a different rate than the plane is, right? But the plane's flying against the spin all the way there and south. So you're imagining the air accelerating the plane backwards up to 1,025 miles an hour, and then slowing it down the opposite direction somehow, so it can treat the Earth as stationary when it lands at a 515 mile per hour tangential velocity on the ground at the airport in Sydney. How are you imagining the air is doing that? There's no dynamics there.
So there's a couple of things going on.
And the pilot can't correct for anything there.
He doesn't need to, right? Because he's always
stationary.
So he's following that red line, following the ground track at his maximum airspeed, right? So if he follows the ground track at his maximum airspeed, it doesn't really matter too much what else is going on because he's kind of attached to the ground.
It does. If you believe that the plane is accelerated eastward up to 1,025 miles an hour, so he'd be in sync at the equator, and then somehow the atmosphere is slowing him down to exactly 515 miles an hour, so that he can treat the Earth as stationary in Sydney. If that's what you think's going on, there's a problem. If it's just stationary, there's no problem. He just flies straight there and lands on a stationary Earth.
But he's always flying no more than 1,000 miles an hour above ground speed, right?
No, his max. The vector forward has nothing to do with eastward. See, that's why I put the arrows now.
No. It's his vector relative to the ground. He's important,
right? He's got a 300 miles an hour cruising speed forward. His plane's not going 1,000 miles an hour eastward and then going down to 515, starting at 963. None of that's going on. And if it is, it has to be happening separately from his forward vector. He flies the plane forward up to 300 miles an hour. That's his cruising speed. He lands as if the Earth is stationary. Now you have to imagine the eastward tangential velocity of the plane increased and decreased because it was in the air. Or it's stationary, one or the other.
Okay, so if we want to look at this in terms of his absolute speed, so if we're on the outside and the Earth is rotating under us, right, so we see these velocities compared to us, if when he takes off, he's already got 900 miles an hour, right, because he's traveling with the Earth. So he's got to gain 300 miles an hour over 8 or 9. No, it's 13 hours that flight, isn't it? I think from LA to Sydney. He's got to gain 300 miles an hour over 13 hours. So what's that acceleration?
No, I'm asking you.
One mile an hour per minute, right?
Wait, when you say he's got to gain, what do you mean by he's got? The pilot doesn't do anything about gaining speed.
No, yeah.
He's just going west southwest. So what do you mean when you say he's got to gain? The atmosphere has to make the plane go that fast?
So we already know the atmosphere is picking up that speed along the way, right?
No, we don't know that. The atmosphere could be blowing in the opposite direction. It could be blowing northward, southward. The winds are going to blow the plane in all different directions at unpredictable rates.
Well, let's
so
say
the wind moving, the air moving the plane would be a wind. And those could be going very heavy westward all day long, right? So it's going against the spin to begin with, and there's a westward wind that's pushing him faster eastward rather than pushing him backwards faster. Do you get that?
Right, yeah. So let's stick with that westward wind, right? So let's say he's got a wind against him all the way of 80 miles an hour.
No, westward wind would be with him. Right, westward wind would be with him. Eastward wind would be against him.
Okay, let's say he's got a wind. Pick one. You got to pick
westward
one, right?
Wind, look at the scenario. The westward wind would give him more speed westward. So you have to imagine it's actually gaining tangential velocity backwards to be in sync with the equator, because there's never going to be a time where the Earth is moving eastward at a different rate than the plane is. Or we could just prove the Earth spins, put a camera out the window, right? And you could see the Earth spinning left to right underneath the plane at a different rate, and you could prove your Earth spins.
Well, you can't prove Earth spin from an aircraft flight.
Well, no, of course not, because it's not spinning.
If
it was spinning, you could, by this very scenario.
You cannot prove Earth spin. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but you cannot demonstrate it from an aircraft flight.
Well, then you're saying that the plane's in perfect sync, going up to 1,025 miles per hour eastward, and it's in perfect sync when it lands at 515 miles per hour eastward. And you have to explain the dynamics of what made the plane gain eastward tangential velocity and then lose eastward tangential velocity to be in perfect sync with it. You have to have the dynamic explanation that actually is something physical you can state and name and cite, and pilots would have to be treated. They have to be trained to know that that's happening, because if it was ever out of sync with the Earth, it could never land the plane. And it wouldn't be stationary relative to the plane, because there's no force to make the plane go faster and slower from just being in the air. Winds going westward would one day faster and slower the next day would have to be compensated for differently by the air accelerating the plane eastward, backwards, and sideways, which doesn't happen because the Earth is stationary. That's the only way it could treat it as stationary, is if the Earth is stationary. Prove me wrong. You can't.
So at any point in time, when does the pilot get out of synchronization with the Earth? When do they fly through?
Never.
Never. Exactly.
Never.
Right.
Because it's stationary. Yeah. But if it was moving, he would be out of sync. That's the point.
Why?
Because there's a inertial and a non-inertial reference frame. They do not move in lockstep. Even if you want to think of it as lockstep, it doesn't move in lockstep. Fluid dynamics wouldn't allow it. The atmosphere moves at a different rate than the Earth is even said to be. They even claim that the weather patterns are caused by the atmosphere being out of sync with the Earth's surface. So that claim alone wouldn't make it perfectly in sync. And there's no dynamics that would even allow you to sanely apply to a plane. A pilot would laugh at you. If you said the air is carrying him backwards to be in sync with the Earth at the exact same rate, even though the winds could be pushing him in the opposite direction and he's slowing down to a land facing the opposite direction, you have to believe the air is carrying him backwards to be in sync with the Earth with no dynamics or any kind of theory. Even there's no theory. They just say it works because the air is generally thought to be about the same rate. That's not even good enough. And it wouldn't move the plane anyway.
Right.
Air carrying the wind would be a wind. A detectable wind, a dynamic wind, which doesn't happen.
So at any point in time, the wind, we know the wind speed, right? That's the air speed relative to the ground. We know that for the entire flight.
Right, with stationary ground. If it was a moving ground, it'd be totally different.
Why?
Because there'd be a different tangential velocity eastward.
No. Why would the wind speed be any different?
Because there'd be a gradient, a tangential velocity gradient. That fluid dynamics would not allow you to think about the air in perfect lockstep. No glober even tries to claim lockstep because it's insane for all kinds of reasons, and it's not even claimed. The globe doesn't even claim that happened. The globe claims it's out of sync, right? So you're never going to have even what you need. Even if it worked perfectly, it wouldn't be good enough.
Okay, so we need to simplify this so you can understand it. So imagine the
What
Earth
about
is
me
not
understanding
rotating.
it? Don't even frame it that way. I understand it perfectly. You have to explain where the dynamics come from. Don't make it out to be that I don't understand something, because I'm drawing you a scenario you have no answer for.
Okay, so let's simplify things and assume the Earth is not rotating, but it's just translating through space, right? Big flat disk, not rotating, zooming through space. What is going to happen to the air there?
No.
What would happen to wind in a big flat disk moving through space? I'm not saying this is a flat Earth argument. I'm saying, what happens to the air in that scenario? If we had an infinite plane with air and it's moving, we're going to get a wind, right? That there's going to be a hydrodynamic
Just
drag.
like it is now, you have winds going in all directions, variably, unpredictably. So any air moving the plane would be a wind, and that's detectable by the pilot, right? He's aware of those things happening. If there was an eastward wind making his plane go twice as fast backwards and sideways, he would know about it.
But he does. He's adjusting for wind all the time, right?
No, he's not adjusting. There's no flight path. He's just flying. If he had westward winds, he had westward winds pushing him in the opposite direction all day long. He knows about those westward winds. So you're saying the westward winds that are moving him faster the opposite direction wouldn't make any difference? He would still be being pushed eastward, even though you got
Are we talking about the same scenario that you've got on the screen here? Are we talking about the LAX to Sydney?
It doesn't even matter. There's no destination in my scenario.
Because
you can have a destination,
changing, right?
No, because you have to imagine the atmosphere. The atmosphere is pushing the plane backwards and sideways. Is that what you believe?
Yes.
And then there's winds moving heavier the opposite direction one day compared to another day, right?
The wind speed doesn't really matter in this scenario.
Oh, but then what's pushing the plane backwards, accelerating it faster to land on the Earth as if it's stationary or slower?
Yeah. So
what's actually the force there? What's that force?
So the aircraft is maintaining airspeed through its engines, right? And its ground speed is equal to the airspeed plus the wind speed or minus the wind speed.
The ground speed is in relation to a stationary Earth. If it was a moving Earth, there'd be a tangential gradient for him to account for. And the atmosphere would have to be in perfect lockstep, even though there's heavier westward winds, and it would have to move the plane backwards, even if there's winds moving the opposite direction, and he's flying against the spin. The dynamics aren't there, Daza. No matter how you want to call the answer as if there's an answer, you have no answer.
I think I understand where you're getting confused now. So the pilot is flying, right?
I'm not confused, by the way. You always have to frame it that way. I'm not confused.
He's got a maximum amount of thrust he can apply, right? And a maximum airspeed he's allowed to achieve. So he's flying along. All he knows about his velocity is how fast the air is shooting past him. He'll be able to measure his ground speed through other means, but all he's doing is controlling his airspeed and following a ground track. So all the way along that path, he's maintaining a safe, efficient airspeed, which is relative to the wind, which is relative to the ground. And if he's slowing down relative to the ground or he's speeding up relative to the ground, it's very insignificant compared to his overall speed, right? So if he's flying along and he's doing, I'm metric here, if you're doing 900 kilometers an hour cruising speed in a 777 and the wind speed is 100 kilometers an hour, your ground speed might be anywhere between 1,000 and 800 kilometers an hour, depending on the wind speed. But you're maintaining that airspeed and you're maintaining the track. The fact that you are rotating forwards with the Earth or backwards with the Earth and gaining from the outside perspective a few hundred kilometers an hour over a 13-hour period is insignificant. The rate of acceleration required to keep up. What is the rate of acceleration?
Call it insignificant. No, listen, bro. You're not even listening. So if the Earth were moving underneath it in a separate reference frame, there would have to be something making the plane stick with the Earth. But there's no claim for that. They just say kinematically, you can think of it as insignificant. The engines aren't moving in the eastward direction. The engines are pushing the plane west, southwest. against the spin and slowing down in the opposite direction when it lands. What?
The aircraft's velocity vector is its airspeed vector plus the wind speed vector. You add them together, you get the ground speed vector. Okay?
So the ground speed vector is in relation to a stationary ground. If the ground were moving separately from the plane, that would all be different when they fly.
No. Okay. So let's have a look at another scenario, right? You can get a drone and fly. You can get a drone and fly it in a train.
I gotta go, you guys. Somebody else might have to talk some sense into this guy because he just ignores it. He's just like, the atmosphere is moving it backwards and sideways faster. And no, it's the engines doing it. No, it's the atmosphere. Do you mean it's the engines doing it, or do you mean it's the atmosphere doing it?
The engines are maintaining airspeed, and the wind plus engine airspeed is what your ground speed is. The fact that you're picking up speed compared to some.
The ground speed is the speed of the plane in relation to a stationary ground, not a moving ground.
No, just to any ground.
Oh, it's a moving ground? Oh, it's a moving ground. So there's a different tangential velocity that the plane has to worry about.
Yeah. It's like I can run from one end.
Oh, well, that's great. You could just prove your Earth spins. You could just show the Earth spinning at a different rate as it goes over the equator, that it's moving. The air is not keeping it in lockstep. We already established the air is not keeping it in lockstep because that's not even said to be in lockstep. And winds could be going in the opposite direction. So no air is moving the plane faster eastward to keep up with the Earth to make sure that it looks stationary from any passengers looking out the window. It always is stationary. Otherwise, you'd see it moving left to right underneath your plane as you go southward. You would see a difference in tangential velocity because of the gradient. Look at the graph and explain to us what's happening. Is the plane ever out of sync, going over the equator and then slowing down to 500? Then the Earth is stationary. Because if it wasn't stationary, it wouldn't be in sync. Without the mechanism to make it in sync, you have no mechanism. The air goes in all directions.
Plus wind.
There's no formula. You can just say thrust plus wind. The winds are going in the opposite direction. If there was something for the other winds that are making them go faster eastward to compensate for, that pilot would know about it. Dude, I have to go. You are making a fool of yourself every time I talk to you, even worse. You really are, and you don't realize it. Because you're a really nice guy. Maybe you actually believe what you're saying, or maybe you're just defending it. But your common sense should hit you in the back of the head someday. Honestly.
So next time we'll start from the beginning and we'll nail down the scenario and we'll go step by step by step. All right?
I did. I nailed it down all night, and you got nailed to the wall.
No, you had us flying around doing loops within about 2 seconds.
Everybody else heard the conversation that you decided didn't happen, I guess.
No, you always want to go and do loops. You want to fly around. You want to not fly a path. You want to follow a path.
And you have to imagine
you want no wind. You want wind going east, wind going west.
Yeah, exactly. Big loops, just like any pilot can do in a joyride. He doesn't have to have a destination or a ground course. He can fly wherever he wants and not worry about it. An emergency flight where he has to go off path and all that happens, he could just land wherever he wants and always treat the Earth as stationary. And you have to have some kind of magical atmosphere that keeps him in sync, even though it's the engines doing it. You have no idea what you're talking about at all, ever. But you sound smart, which makes it kind of like deceiving.
It's like flying a drone in an aircraft, right? The drone has a speed relative to the ground that's significantly faster than its airspeed. You can fly around in there. You don't care that you're moving. Okay?
You don't have a ground speed. You have to imagine if you did the big loops, that it's pushing the plane to the left-hand side and then to the right-hand side, no matter where he goes. The atmosphere is clinging onto the plane and acting like Velcro with the Earth, with the surface of the Earth, which the atmosphere is not even claimed to do. But it would have to act that way for your kinematic concept and whole world view to stay alive. And that's why you cling on to these ridiculous explanations that would not even work dynamically. And think about them kinematically and just say, oh, it worked because we have to think about ground speed, even though it's a stationary ground relative to the plane's movement that even gives it a ground speed. If there was a tangential gradient, the ground speed would change all the time. It's not even said to be in the same reference frame, but you're treating it as one reference frame when it's actually two. That's the difference between how you would have to train a pilot to fly over an oblate spinning spheroid compared to a stationary Earth. But they train them to fly over a stationary Earth because it's stationary. Otherwise, it wouldn't work that way. I have to go. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. Take care. So here's the thing about reference frames. Everybody is in the same reference frame all the time. Everybody is in every reference frame at all points in time. Reference frame is just a point of view for analysis. It's not a physical thing.
Except for the pilot, whilst we're watching the plane fly over our head. He's in a different reference frame.
He's in.
If I'm on the ground staring at a plane, he's in a different reference frame. He's separate from the ground. He's doing his own thing.
Yeah, okay. So you can have a separate reference frame, but he's also in my reference frame. If I'm watching him on the ground matrix, in my reference frame, he is travelling at 1,000 kilometres an hour north, right? In his reference frame, he's stationary. He's in his reference frame. He's in my reference frame. Reference frame is just where you take your measurements from. It's pretty rare that I paste anything from AI.
Well, that looks like it was.
The second law definition is all I pasted in that comment.
From where?
I just asked Google. I said, what is the second law of thermodynamics?
Because I find it very interesting, the little tacked on bit. So gas expanding into a vacuum is likely to increase the entropy of the system.
I got a question though. You gotta know why the motherfucking transgender, the trans training.
That's great. So gas expanding in a vacuum is likely to increase the entropy of a system, but it doesn't mean it has to expand. I don't remember reading that before.
No, because that's my interpretation, right? My understanding.
No. If you're going to post a law, you don't post your fuckwit interpretation of it. That's shit, Daza. You post the correct thing. Because we had another little
can you take the server view off indefinite? Like you did nothing wrong.
So Matrix, then, when you talk
you
about...
can shut up too. So yeah, Daza, if you're going to post up laws of anything... We had a weasel in here earlier wanting to know what the second law of thermodynamics was, being an absolute smartass, and all of a sudden you've posted your own version of it.
No,
do not do that.
I posted this. So there's two things happening here, right? You've got the second law of thermodynamics, and you've got the atmosphere as a system, right? And it's not just the second law of thermodynamics driving the behaviour. There's a whole bunch of other things obviously dominated by that. But so the thing is, and this is my understanding of what happens in the atmosphere, right? Like it or not, as you go up, pressure reduces to effectively zero, which why that happens is almost immaterial to this argument, but it seems to be important. So the reason I think it happens is that there's something preventing the expansion of the gas. Otherwise, it would be expanding upwards. We'd have this massive equalization or escaping of the atmosphere from Earth, right? Something is preventing that escape. And it's not a container because... Okay. So if it was
Daza, I'm going to make it easy for you. If there's gas pressure, pressure. It's pressing against something.
Yeah, okay.
You can do it, Daz. I know you're going to get lost. That's how it's derived. Pressure, PSI. Pressure in square inches. Of what, Daza?
Pressure is square inches of area, right?
Pressure of what?
of the gas.
Square inches of what?
It's just square inches.
Of what?
Pressure against square inches of a surface.
Excellent. So there's a surface of a container. That's how you get your pressure. If no container, no pressure. Gas gone.
Okay, so
Daza falls over like the rest of us do.
Okay, so let's take that, right? We've got a container. It is containing the pressure. Why isn't the pressure uniform throughout the container?
Well, just to make you feel warm and fuzzy, Daza, we've actually got video footage of a smaller container, like oxy-cylinder bottle size, with a pressure gradient down it.
That.
Excellent. So you understand that gradients work inside small containers. Good boy. So I'm just having a wild guess that it's probably going to work in a big container too.
Okay, so you have no cause, but
so what happened when old mate opened the top of the oxy bottle?
It came out.
The gas jumped out, didn't it?
Yeah.
Fancy that. Why did it do that? There's a gradient there. Why did it do it?
There's a very high local pressure difference.
Local pressure difference?
Yeah. So the gas has nothing preventing it expanding. So going back to that experiment,
the container would be nothing preventing it from expanding. We'd all be fucking dead, mate. Hello? Why do you make shit up, Daza? There's gas laws there. Obviously, you've not read none of them, or they've just whizzed past you as Jedi's explained this shit to you over and over and over again. It's a wonder he hasn't got it recorded so he can just go play, sit back and drink his coffee.
Probably has. Well, I think you've fundamentally got it wrong, right? None of you. So that experiment with those.
This is Daza. You've fundamentally got it wrong because I don't like your fucking answer. Why don't you just say it, Daza? Instead of being a shit cunt little weasel, why don't you just say, I don't like your answer, I like mine better? That's what it comes down to. You don't like our answer because what? Show us on the doll where the flat earthers hurt you, mate. Come on. You're here praising to the ball. But here's the kicker, Daz. There's no measured curvature. So you can imagine all of your satellites, all of your bullshit wannabe gas pressure gradients, and all of the other crap. And at the end of the day, there's no measured curvature. And you can't grasp that. You don't want to grasp that because it offends you. Because whatever you've done in your lifetime, you've cuddled up to this ball teddy bear, and you are now offended by the fact that your whole fucking life has been pissed up the wall because there's no measured curvature and you might not live on the ball that you thought you did. Get over it, boy. Everyone else has.
I could flip that 180 degrees right back at you, right?
I used to be a ball-hard believer, so you can flip it all you like, Sonny.
Yeah. So let's go back steps to the guy with the pressure gauges and the.
And what are you going to prove? All you're going to do is rinse and repeat the same fucking shit that you were trying to say earlier. Daza, we probably don't want to listen to your bullshit because you are violating gas laws. If you think that we've got gas pressure without some kind of fucking containment, you're either stoned, stupid, or you fuck off. You shouldn't be in this conversation.
Let's see. I'll post it in the text chat for everyone. You can click on it if you want to, Daza. I'm doing it for everybody. Yeah. ECEF, which stands for Earth-Centered, Earth-Fixed, is a geocentric coordinate system used to represent locations on or near Earth. It's a 3D Cartesian system where the origin is at the Earth's center of mass. You left all of this out when you said what it is, yeah? This is important. And the axis rotate... hold on a second, dude. Let's relax. And the axis rotate with the Earth. Interesting. This means the coordinates of a point on the Earth's surface remain relative constant, excluding tectonic movement as the Earth rotates.
Yep.
Daza, have you been talking about a coordinate system that begs the question? This is interesting, dude. Oh, it's begging the question, sir. You don't know that the coordinate system actually relates to the Earth as it is for this coordinate system to work the way it does. It's already assuming that the Earth is this globe that you think it is.
Okay. So the only thing that it assumes is that the Earth's center of mass is where it is.
Well, no. It says here that the Earth's rotating as well.
Okay, yeah. So the rotation part.
So wait a minute, Daza, you lied. You said that's the only thing it's assuming. No, not that it's just assuming the center of mass. It's assuming that the Earth's rotating too. It says so right here.
Yeah.
Why? We're all reading what you're saying is the thing that it's not saying. It is saying that. Why are you denying these things? Well, I'm more concerned. I'm more concerned as to why are you not telling everybody the whole story?
The whole story.
Yeah, you also have to presume. You also have to presume the radius of the Earth as well. Just adding that in.
No, you don't.
Really?
So here's the
do.
All right, Daza, you're not fooling anyone, dude. We can all look up the information just like you can.
Yeah.
I think
So I'll give you some hints on what to look up. So the satellite orbits, due to physics, are also physically going to be associated with the center of mass of the Earth, right? Because that's what orbits do. They orbit around the center of Earth.
Yeah, but you're making it sound like there's a center of mass. What's interesting, I think.
So here's what you can do, right?
All right, you're starting to interrupt. That means that you're losing ground here. That's okay. You can interrupt. Go ahead.
So you can actually, as an end user with GPS receivers, you can actually determine the orbits of the satellites from the information that you see. Not because they're telling you where they are, but because you can observe their signals and multiple GPS receivers.
Yeah.
Where you know their relative
I don't like. Honestly, Daza, I don't care about observing their signals,
dude. A new coordinate system, right?
Yeah, really. So, what new coordinate system are you establishing?
So you could create a new coordinate system that was centered on you.
Okay, so not the Earth center. Well, here's the other thing that I wanted to show the audience. I'll put it in the text chat for everybody. This is a relationship to other systems that ECEF is using. Is often used in conjunction with other coordinate systems like the WGS84 in the geodetic datum.
Yep. So that's how you turn ECF into lat long, is through WGS84.
Right, yeah. But the system itself is begging the question in multiple levels, right? There's so many things that you can say that are assumed for the coordinate system to be what it is. There's nothing that the coordinate system... This satellite information that you're saying that you're presenting that shows that it's measuring the Earth is not doing what you're saying is doing. It's already preloaded. The information is preloaded into it so that it can give it a distance from the observer to the satellite idea of a coordinate system superimposed over the distance. So the distance itself is not measurement as far as like what the Earth is, geometrically. You're not measuring the curve of the Earth. You're measuring the distance between you and that thing, which in turn you're superimposing this information, which is stating that the Earth is already a globe based on the XYZ coordinate system. So you're assuming, okay, so I'll give you an example, right? Let's say you have a distance to the satellite. Okay. Now, from the distance to the satellite to where you are, how do you know the drop over distance measurements are figured out? Are you actually That's what I'm trying to say, Daza. You don't. So if you're going based on the coordinate system, you're just assuming that the Earth is already this thing that it's superimposed over the distance information. You don't actually know the Earth is curving. You're just basing your worldview information on this coordinate system. That's why this is important to you, because you don't have any verification of the distance measurement of the Earth actually being a globe. You're just making it sound like to the audience that you're measuring using a satellite, and it's not. You're not measuring using a satellite. That's the honest truth.
So what happens with GPS is your position. So the satellites have a claimed position in this coordinate space, right?
Yeah.
Your position you work out is relative to those satellites in that coordinate space. Because you're on the surface of the Earth, your position also has a position on the surface of the Earth. But the primary position is the one relative to the satellites in X, Y, Z. Okay?
Yeah, in X, Y, Z. In X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're utilizing that system. It's like you're making it sound like you're verifying that the Earth is curving. You're not doing that. The satellite distance from the observer is not verifying that the Earth is curving. Nor does it. So, it doesn't check. It doesn't check for the Earth's curvature. It's preloaded into the data, so that when you use a distance, Daza, it's staring me in the face, dude. You can't say no to the information. It's what the coordinate system is based on. It's what it says it's based on, dude. Look, dude. Oh man, the origin of the ECEF coordinate system is at the Earth's center of mass.
Yes,
that's begging the question. You're begging the question that the Earth has. How do you know the Earth has a center of mass?
Because it has a mass.
No. How do you know it has a center of mass?
All objects with mass have a center of mass.
Well, how do you know this one does? What's the verification? What's the verification of that?
Can you show me one that doesn't? Can you show me?
I want you to no. Don't flip this around. This isn't a burden of proof reversal. I'm gonna expose you so that everybody knows. Every time you come in with this little song and dance of yours, it goes nowhere. So how do you know the Earth has a center of mass?
Because it has mass. All objects.
Yeah. That's just. That's just. You're still begging the question. How do we figure out that it has a center of mass? Where's the center located? Because this coordinate system is based on that center. It's a specific location.
Yeah.
X, Y, Z. Remember, you keep saying that over and over. X, Y, Z. X, Y, Z. How do you know that X, Y, Z meet at a certain point? What's the verification of that? I want. If you answer my question, Daza, answer my question. Okay. How do you know the X, Y, Z meets at a certain point in the center?
So we can determine the center of mass of the Earth by placing an object in orbit.
Yeah, wait a minute. No, that's begging. Dude, you can't do the opposite. You're using the system. Okay, you're backwards now. No. You can't place something in orbit if you don't have the coordinate system as you say you do. If you're already saying that the Earth is a globe, the thing that's going in orbit is trying to utilize the Earth already with this system of that you say that you use, ECEF. If you don't have that, then you can't put it in orbit because it doesn't have the XYZ coordinate system. So I'm wondering, how did you get that system in the first place? How was it obtained?
It's arbitrary. We just made it up out of
arbitrary. Really?
Yep.
Oh.
All
so you made it up out of thin air. This is your concession. You know that, right? You actually just you're throwing dirt on your top of your grave. You're just basically saying we made it up. So does that mean that the whole system? Alpha. I'm going to sidestep the system, Daza, because you didn't give us any information of how they determined in the first place that XYZ was determined by people finding out that this is what the Earth actually is. We made it up, according to you.
So you would agree that in the literature, the common belief is that the Earth is a sphere of a particular radius and particular mass, right?
Well, people have imagined it to be, so I can agree with you there.
So the people that built the rockets believed that. And they put satellites in
space. They based their information off of that.
It doesn't matter what you think about the evidence. They thought it was correct.
I see. So then they did. You turned this into begging a question into a pragmatic fallacy. So it works. Yeah. Therefore, the premise is true. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. That's right.
You just agreed to the logical fallacy. You dunce.
No. If something exists, it is true.
No, dude. Not if it exists. If it utilizes, listen. If you're utilizing the coordinate system and it works, then the premise is true. That what we thought all along is the case. You didn't verify that information. You're using that it's pragmatic. That you're trying to say that because your system works the way it does, and then we send rockets up there. Bob's your uncle, man. Like, what else do we need to know? It works.
If I can measure
voila.
the orbit of, if I can measure the path of a satellite relative to me as it goes by, and that path says it's in a spherical orbit, then the satellite is in a circular orbit.
Yeah, so
there's no begging the question because we measured its path.
Dude.
Sorry. Are you claiming that the satellite rotates 360 degrees in one orbit?
So when you say rotate, do you mean rotate to face the Earth, or do you mean it's...
Yeah, it's always facing the Earth. So as it rotates around the Earth, that requires the satellite to rotate. It's going to need to change its pitch. If you can show me the pitch data from a satellite to demonstrate that it's actually rotating 360 degrees when it completes an orbit, that would be interesting.
It would be too. I don't know that they publish. They can. No, I don't.
Okay, we have from aircrafts. They don't rotate around the sphere.
Orbit,
You're claiming that. So why? This is why I don't engage. Sorry, Alpha. I should have interrupted.
No, it's fine. He's just basing this information, and he's arguing from a standpoint of ignorance. So he just believes that the Earth is utilized as a globe because of the system and how it operates. So the operation of the system and things that take advantage of it are utilizing the Earth as a globe. So he's basing this off of many logical fallacies, right? As was pointed out, Earth's rotation, Earth's center of mass, and the measurements of radius. I'm going through. Casey's pointing them out in the text chat, if you can see, and many other people that have noticed that this coordinate system is. I don't know what you. Honestly, dude, this is kind of getting to be where you just use this, and then you're on top of all of that. You're saying because it works, it is the system is true. No, it's not.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? So you've rejected all of that evidence, and
no, this isn't evidence of the Earth as a globe, Daza. This isn't evidence of the Earth as a globe. No, it's not.
But you've just rejected all of the evidence out of hand.
It's your wishful thinking. It's your wishful thinking. So no matter how smooth tone you are, it's not going to make it true, bro. You're in a state of belief. It's wishful thinking that you think this is proving that the Earth is a globe. It's never doing that. You're you're utilizing a system. The system itself. It's not true that the Earth is a globe based on this coordinate system. It's not true. Absolutely not.
So can we go backwards? So can we go backwards from what we can see?
No, the origin. The origin of this coordinate system, as you said, is made up. You said it so yourself.
Yeah, all coordinate systems are arbitrary. So Alpha, can you tell me whether or not this is true?
Yeah, it's not true.
Can I ask you the question?
It's made up.
Are coordinates across the surface of the Earth in ECEF complying to a sphere, true or false?
False.
Okay, so that's incorrect. That's factually incorrect.
Yeah, because what sphere is there? Is there one that's using the data, or is there one that's using the actual? Yeah, is the actual idea that you think that listen? You think that the actual Earth is a sphere, so you're thinking that the system is taking advantage of the Earth being an actual sphere. It's not. You could put whatever. Let's put it this way: you could put whatever coordinate system you want, superimpose on top of whatever the satellite's doing, so long as the numbers check out from the distance to the observer. It doesn't matter what the coordinate system actually is. It could be a pyramid. So long as the coordinates are exactly the same from the distance to the observer, that's the only thing that matters. And then you can superimpose whatever type of coordinate system you want. And in this particular case, it was thought to be an ellipsoid. According to what I'm reading here in the wiki, the wiki's kind of just going over like what the information, where it was derived from, the type of coordinate system it's using with the equation, right?
So it's multiple observers, right?
Yeah, you're not gonna, dude. The only thing you're doing here is putting lipstick on a pig. It's still a pig, dude. Like, we don't have anything verifying that the Earth is an actual globe.
So can we go backwards from what we can determine, and you tell me when? Yeah,
I've determined that it's factually incorrect that the Earth is a globe. So if you're saying this, like your whole point in here is to have a determination whether somebody in this chat can utilize whatever you're saying that satellites are doing to determine that the Earth is a globe, that is not what's happening. What's happening here is that your wishful thinking and imagination have taken over. It has consumed you, Daza. You are believing that the satellite is showing you that the Earth is a globe. It's not doing that.
You're just a globe-tart, dude.
Using the Spike, I don't need your help. Using the EF system. None of it is showing that the Earth is an actual globe.
So Alpha, can I backpedal and ask you the question again? If we
dude, I don't need your backpedaling. Like you, honestly, because I was here to expose you. That's it.
That's fine.
No, it doesn't matter about bearing the answer. Shut up, Spike. I've asked you kindly. Now I'm gonna say shut up. I don't want to. So if you're listen, Daza, if you're doing this, maybe to soothe your wounds over the past time that you've been trying to show everybody that you know what you're talking about. You might be able to say that you know what you're saying to some extent, but you're just, number one, an end user of the information. Number two, you're not determining that. Why do you need to interrupt me, Spike? Why?
Sorry,
what's the need for that, dude? So
I was galvanized by your speech, dude. That's why.
There's no information that we're looking at from this system that's showing us any determination that the Earth is a globe. What I'm doing is I'm walking people through this, that you have never, since the time that you've even produced this information, determined that the Earth is an actual oblate spheroid. Nothing that you're doing here is doing that. Everybody can know in the text chat and in the voice chat, we can tell you that you're just assuming that the Earth is a globe based on this system. And so your wishful thinking is never going to determine that the Earth is a globe. You're never going to give us here in this chat a way to find out if the Earth is an actual globe. Never. Not once.
No, because you won't allow me to.
It doesn't matter if I allow you to, dude. Listen, all you're going to do is preach to us some more of how your wishful thinking is that the Earth's oblateness is being proved by a satellite going around it. And so that's all. You're going to keep saying that over and over and over again. And it's never the determining factor. I don't care how technical you get, Daza. That's never going to change the fact that you can never point out the fact that you're determining the Earth to be a globe based on this information. That's never happening. So if you're going to be met with the same answer every time I see you, every time I hear you using your smooth tones, because I know that's what you like to do. You just like to imagine. Because that's where this coordinate system came from, an imagination of somebody. It didn't come from somebody actually measuring. No. This is pointing out that you are in a logical fallacy. Multiple logical fallacies, I should say.
Okay.
Affirming the consequent
logical fallacy.
There's multiple, dude. There's begging the question.
Can we start?
Affirming the consequent, pragmatic fallacy. Like, dude, I'm charging you with all these logical fallacies, utilizing the idea that the system, the coordinate system, is doing anything to verify that the Earth is a globe. All of this stuff, Earth's rotation, Earth's center, the measures of radius, all this. So all you're doing right now is giving people the idea that you're talking a little bit technical about what satellites are doing based on being an end user, and then thinking that you're just going to put one over on the listener. You're not going to do that, dude. Not here in this chat.
Guilty is charged.
Yes, we don't like cotton pickers here, okay?
Hold on, Daza, do you even care that you're being fallacious, like your logic is fallacious?
Yeah.
Do you even care?
No, he doesn't.
I don't even have a chance to express my logic because Alpha stops me and talks over the top. Because he doesn't want to hear my logic from the beginning.
No, it's not. Listen, I'm pointing out the fact that all of these logical fallacies are being pointed out to you. You're not addressing them. You're sidestepping them to tell me how they're not logical fallacies. And it's amazing at this point. Even you have conceded that this was just a made-up, arbitrary coordinate system. It's not something that you're saying that you know has been.
They're all arbitrary.
There you go. I mean, why have you then? Yeah, why have you then said that there's something here that we're going to measure the Earth's curvature with if they're just made up?
So can we go to the very basis of my logical progression in this? If I have three GPS receivers.
No, that's incorrect. You don't start there.
This
Sorry.
This is how I
GPS. Listen, no, because I know that. That's what I've been pointing out. GPS is referencing a coordinate system. So it's not your basis. It's already a derivative of what you should be looking at. Where did they derive the coordinate? Yeah, I'm going to point it out to you. Where did they? It's not a base. It's not a foundation. You don't start with GPS. What's the foundation?
Not starting with GPS.
You just said so.
So the foundation is an observation.
Of what?
Of what my GPS position is.
There you go.
And then we start
back
from there,
to GPS.
Right?
Yeah, it's back to GPS.
Yeah. So we
No. You're not going to continue. It's not the foundation. GPS is based on a coordinate system. You goofball. You're not starting with GPS. GPS is based on a coordinate system that's utilizing this coordinate system, according to you. Which you said, and you stated this, that it's arbitrary. People made it up. How can this be more? It's clear as day, bro. You're in denial at this point. And you want to say, let me speak. Can I speak? I just want to speak. Yeah, of what? Of you telling us that everything that you're basing your worldview on is based on GPS, which is based on, it's a derivative, right? It's based on an arbitrary idea of a coordinate system that somebody just flippantly made up. Oh, I think this is what will work. Yeah? No verification of the Earth. No, you can't. No verification of the Earth's oblate spheroidness at all. Nothing.